This morning, Middle East crisis, major breaking news just in. A US airbase in Iraq attacked with ballistic missiles. Iran says it's responsible. All eyes are now on how the US will respond. Race against time, firefighters back home locked in a tense battle to stop a mega inferno before temperatures soar once again. And petrol set to skyrocket, record prices at the bowser expected when you should be filling up.
This is 7 News with Angela Cox.
First to breaking news, Iran has just launched a ballistic missile attack on a US airbase in Iraq. The base is home to a large contingent of American troops, but at this stage we don't know just how many people may have been killed or injured. Let's go live to US correspondent Amelia Brace. Amelia, this situation is developing very quickly. What's the latest?
Well, as you said, Ange, this is very much happening as we speak. We're getting fresh pictures in from Iranian state television that they say show this attack. The Pentagon says that more than a dozen ballistic missiles were fired at 2 Iraqi bases which house US troops. Earlier today, US bases across the Middle East were placed on high alert to possibly shoot down Iranian forces as intelligence mounted about the real threat of an imminent attack against US targets. It now seems that those fears have been realised. There are no details yet on casualties, as you mentioned. The US military saying they're currently assessing the damage.
Amelia, President Trump promised any attack on US personnel would be met with an extreme response. This is a very worrying development.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Just today, the president spoke from the White House saying the US response to an Iranian attack would be, quote, disproportionate, even threatening to target cultural sites in the country. We know that the president has been briefed on this latest development. His press secretary saying, we are aware of the reports of attacks on US facilities in Iraq. The president has been briefed and is monitoring the situation closely and consulting with his national security team.
So, Amelia, this appears to be the start of the retaliation promised by Iran after the assassination of their top military commander.
Yeah, that's right. Tehran always said that there would be a military response to what was effectively the assassination of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani in a US airstrike last week. Just today, Iran's National Security Council announced it was considering 13 revenge scenarios that would be, quote, a historic nightmare for the US. Well, it now seems that nightmare has become a reality. We now have to wait and see how the US responds.
OK, Amelia, we'll check back in with you later in the bulletin. Thank you. Now let's go to political reporter Jennifer Beshwari in Canberra for us this morning. Jen, how is our government responding?
Well, Ange, Prime Minister Scott Morrison is aware of the situation and is monitoring it very closely. On his flight to Kangaroo Island this morning, he's spoken with the Chief of the Defence Force, Angus Campbell, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Maurice Payne. In the last hour or so, he's receiving regular updates as well from the ground. Scott Morrison also called the opposition leader, Anthony Albanese, to brief him on the situation. Now, Australia has no troops at the Al Asad Air Base. We do, however, have 300 troops and diplomats in Taji. That's about a 3-hour drive away from where this attack took place. There are grave fears for our forces there, and an order could go out today, in fact any minute now, to withdraw our troops and our diplomats. But we're also in a strict alliance with the United States, so we could be called upon to assist if this violence escalates any further. Now, our defence forces, though, have been expecting this kind of retaliation following the killing of Tehran's military chief. So there is very troubling news out of the Middle East today, and I'll bring you all the updates from Canberra as soon as I get them.
OK, thanks so much, Jennifer. To other news, emergency crews have taken to the fire grounds with renewed intensity, desperate to get on top of more than 100 blazes still burning across the nation's southeast. Alex Hart is live for us. Alex, what's the situation where you are right now?
And a bit of frustration creeping in here at the Merimbula Airport. This services the far south coast. It is technically open, but because of heavy smoke that's settled over here, only a couple of choppers have been able to take off today. You can see behind me an air crane and also 2 Black Hawk helicopters. They've been grounded now for a couple of days. No commercial flights can get in. Even the Deputy Prime Minister, he tried to arrive here this morning, tried to land twice, but then was diverted to Moruya. This smoke, most of it is coming from that wood chip mill that is still burning just south of Eden. It is causing significant problems, hampering efforts to prepare for the bushfire conditions when they worsen worsen on Friday. There are crews spread out around the region doing what they can to reinforce containment lines. Utility companies also trying to move in when the roads are safe to restore power and improve the phone coverage as well. But certainly across this region there is a collective feeling, if you like, of people just trying to come to terms with what the region has been through and also trying to catch their breath ahead of those conditions getting worse again on Friday.
We don't think it'll be as bad as what it's been in the last few weeks, but we can't afford to be complacent because these days the fires are creating their own weather conditions, and that's a new phenomena that hadn't been part of our fire season before.
What we see now, the immediate trauma that people are suffering, that families and communities are going through, that will go on for years and years and years, and we won't know where this ends for a long time to come. So no, this is a scale that's unbelievable.
Alex, debate is continuing this morning around why this bushfire crisis is so severe.
Yes, Ange, calls growing louder for there to be a royal commission once all of this is over. A coalition of firefighting unions getting together today to make this call. They say there needs to be this inquiry into the response and into the causes. The federal government has foreshadowed a significant inquiry down the track. A lot of the focus in terms of political debate has been on climate change policies and also hazard reduction burns. The Rural Fire Service Commissioner, Shane Fitzsimmons, this morning hit back at claims from Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce that it was a lack of burning off that was the main contributing factor to what we've been seeing.
You always get fires, but it's the intensity of the fire because the amount of the fuel load that is catching on fire. And we've got to get a better capacity to deal with this.
The environmental clearances are invariably not our problem with hazard reduction burning. Our biggest challenge with hazard reduction is the weather and the windows available to do it safely and effectively. And then more complicated ways is the resourcing to deliver on it.
Now, there is obviously the concern about Friday, but also some very high fire danger today as well, particularly in that snowy Monero region down towards the Victorian border in the southern slopes where a total fire ban is in place.
OK, thank you, Alex. As the political fallout continues, firefighters have more immediate concerns on their hands. They're desperately trying to get control of a mega inferno on the New South Wales-Victorian border before conditions deteriorate. Nathan Templeton reports.
Well, the feeling among locals is here we go again. So many of them have already had their lives devastated and now they're just dreading the return of this heat, with temperatures ready to go back up around 30 tomorrow and up to 40 on Friday. Here in Gippsland in the far east at Mallacoota, more than 100 people have been stranded for a week and they are desperately hoping that conditions will allow them to be evacuated by chopper today. While moving up through the alpine areas and particularly in the northeast corner of the state, there's a sense among authorities and firefighters that they've got one more day to make some progress on those blazes, get some containment lines in before the heat returns. The biggest concern is that Corryong fire, which is now very close to jumping the Murray River and merging with some of the New South Wales fires in the south there. So after something of a lull in this area, people are very much back on edge in these fire grounds.
Prince Charles has made a rare address on camera offering support and his condolences to our bushfire victims.
I fear this is a hopelessly inadequate way of trying to get a message to all of you that both my wife and myself are thinking of you so very much at such an incredibly difficult time and in such impossible and terrifying circumstances.
A staunch advocate of environmental protection, the Prince lamented the loss of our wildlife. He also paid tribute to Australia's strength and resilience in the face of the disaster. Drivers are being urged to fill up now ahead of a petrol price hike. Tensions in the Middle East are expected to impact the market and send the cost of unleaded to record highs. Brittany Lane has more.
Petrol prices are expected to climb as soon as this weekend, so drivers are being encouraged to fill up their tanks sooner rather than later. This is due to current tension between the US and the Middle East, which is predicted to have a major impact on fuel markets. Here in southeast Queensland, experts are warning unleaded fuel will be back to those record highs seen in mid-December, where it jumped to a whopping 172.9 cents a litre. And it's also affecting the rest of the country. The average price in Sydney and Melbourne is currently sitting around the $1.40 mark. Adelaide is much higher at $1.71. So the message is plain and simple for motorists. Fill up when you can, with prices likely to climb this weekend or early next week.
Coming up in 7 News, we'll cross back to the US with major new developments on the crisis in the Middle East. Returning to our top story, Iran has launched a ballistic missile attack on a US airbase in Iraq. The base is home to a large contingent of American troops. It is unclear if there have been any casualties. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard says a second wave of strikes has started. NBC's Richard Engel has the latest.
This is still a developing story and we are trying to learn more, but military sources tell us that there have been multiple incoming rounds. They describe them as rockets, at least 6 of them fired at the Al-Assad air base in Iraq. It's in western Iraq, hundreds of miles from the Iranian border. Soldiers there taking shelter in bunkers. Iranian state media says that the response to the killing of that Iranian general has begun, claiming that tens of rockets have been fired, calling this a decisive response. This just hours after that funeral turned deadly for Qasem Soleimani, the general.
A mysterious disease has infected dozens of people in Hong Kong, causing extreme breathing difficulties and fever. Authorities believe it may have originated in central China. A number of patients visited the city of Wuhan before getting sick. The disease is showing no signs of dissipating. Investigators have already established it's not SARS, common influenza or bird flu. A 93-year-old man has shot his building manager in both knees after his apartment flooded. He stormed the maintenance office of his Las Vegas apartment block and opened fire. He says it was a simple act of revenge. His victim is expected to recover. The elderly shooter could now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Prince Harry and Meghan have stopped in at Canada House in London. They enjoyed tea and a traditional Canadian dessert on what was their first royal engagement of the year. Europe correspondent Sarah Greenhalgh reports.
Well, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were all smiles, arriving at Canada House looking very happy and relaxed after their 6-week break. They were there to thank the High Commissioner for the hospitality, the warmth and support they received over the course of their holiday. They spent most of it out of the spotlight. They spent time at a $20 million waterfront mansion on Vancouver Island. Meghan has said before how she thinks of Canada as a second home. She lived there for 7 years while starring in Suits. This was the couple's first public appearance since November. They also made a private visit earlier in the day to Hub Community Kitchen. Meghan wanted to check in on the women who she launched that cookbook with, the Grenfell women, back in September 2018. The couple has received a lot of criticism over Christmas for taking baby Archie away for their first festive break as a family, not going to Sandringham with the Queen and the rest of the family. But there was a very large crowd of well-wishers, of fans there at Canada House to greet them and to support them. So they are starting the year on a positive note. 2020 will be a big one for the Sussexes. They are due to launch their new foundation, Sussex Royal. There is speculation about whether that will be here in the UK or in the US. They have the Invictus Games coming up in May, and then, of course, that looming lawsuit with the British tabloids. So it will be very interesting to see how the year plays out.
Next in 7 News Sport with Jim Wilson, including breaking AFL news on one of the game's biggest days. Also the tennis tantrum that turned into a family feud. Returning to our top story, the attack on a US base in Iraq. Let's go to political reporter Jennifer Beshwari. Jen, you have new developments from Canberra.
Yeah, that's right. And Prime Minister Scott Morrison has just released a statement saying, as I mentioned, he's already been in contact with the Chief of the Defence Force, Angus Campbell, and the Foreign Affairs Minister, Maurice Payne. He says that he has directed the Chief of the Defence Force to take whatever actions are necessary to protect and defend our ADF and diplomatic personnel and keep Australians safe. So this could mean that they could be withdrawn from the Taji bases any minute now. But as I mentioned, we also are in that ANZUS alliance alliance with the United States, so this could potentially mean that we will be assisting if the violence escalates. We have to wait and see what happens there. The National Security Committee as well of Cabinet has been meeting to review this situation, the Prime Minister says, and take decisions as necessary since Saturday. It's already scheduled to meet again for the purpose on Thursday and will be convened sooner should further information be confirmed requiring such a response, and will be done so in consultation with the Chief of the Defence Force. So Prime Minister Scott Morrison, on his way to Kangaroo Island as we speak, is monitoring the situation very closely, and we are expecting to hear from him in about an hour or so. And we are also expecting to hear from the Chief of the Defence Force at 2:30 here in Canberra, and I'll bring you the latest from them.
OK, thanks so much, Jennifer. And it's time now for sport with Jim Wilson, and you've got some big news yourself.
We have, yeah. We've got some news from the AFL. Good morning to you, Ange. Morning, everyone. Swans superstar Lance Franklin is in doubt for the start of the AFL Premiership season. The 32-year-old has had a minor operation on his knee. After feeling some discomfort over the New Year break, Franklin will resume training in around 10 weeks and will be racing the clock to be fit for round one. The Swannies open their season against the Crows in Adelaide on March 21. It's just 45 days to go until the Women's T20 Cricket World Cup held on home soil, and the Aussies say they can handle the pressure. Elisa Healy and Ash Gardner played beach cricket at Bondi this morning with Olympic gold medalist Kerry Pothast and basketballer Liz Cambridge. Healy says they are ready to embrace the favourites tag.
Look, we're going to have our work cut out for us. We're going to have to play some really good and consistent T20 cricket, which is really difficult to do to get through the pool stages. But for us, we'll take a bit of confidence out of how we've played over the last 18 months.
The final will be held on International Women's Day at the MCG on March 8. Tensions reached boiling point between Joss Butler and Bernard Verlander in Cape Town as England had a series levelling win over South Africa in the second test. Ben Stokes was the hero once again for England, taking 3 late wickets to clinch a dramatic 189-run victory with only 50 balls left in the match. The 4-test series is level at 1-1. Defending Big Bash champions, the Melbourne Renegades have crashed to their 7th straight defeat. Aussie limited overs skipper Aaron Finch fell for a golden duck in the first over of last night's 6-wicket loss to the Perth Scorchers in Geelong. Mitch Marsh had plenty to smile about after taking the wicket of older brother Sean.
He gets some treatment from his brother and caught. Little bro's got the big bro again and caught on the boundary.
The Renegades recovered to post 175 after copping 2 nasty blows. Englishman Liam Livingstone recovered to lead the Scorchers' run chase with 59 of 39 deliveries. Perth chased down the target with an over to spare. Tonight, it's the Melbourne Stars taking on the Sydney Thunder, and you can watch every ball live and free across the screens of 7. Just check your local guides. A bizarre meltdown has overshadowed Australia's win over Greece at the ATP Cup. After the first set against Nick Kyrgios, Stefanos Tsitsipas had a temper tantrum for the ages. The world number 6 seemed to hit his coach and dab with his racket before his mum came courtside to scold him. Kyrgios didn't let the family feud distract him as he kept Australia's perfect record intact with a 3-set win.
No, I'm on probation, so I got to stay in check.
Well, you've been a very good boy, Nick.
Yeah, I'm trying.
The Aussies take on Great Britain in the quarterfinals tomorrow. He's been a good boy, and I tell you what, he's been terrific in being passionate and supportive of the bushfire crisis. Well done, Nick Kyrgios.
Yeah, well done indeed. Thanks so much, Jim. Next in 7's Morning News, we'll get the latest on the crisis in the Middle East, plus the national weather forecast with David Brown. Returning to our top story, Iran has launched a ballistic missile attack on a US airbase in Iraq. The base is home to a large contingent of American troops. It is unclear if there have been any casualties. It's understood US President Donald Trump will soon address the world from the Oval Office. Let's go back now to US correspondent Amelia Brace. Amelia, what is the latest?
Well, Ange, the Pentagon has just released a briefing saying that there were, in fact, 2 attacks. They say that more than a dozen ballistic missiles were launched from within Iran, targeting those 2 bases that house US troops. This, of course, was not a surprise. US bases across the Middle East were placed on high alert to possibly shoot down Iranian missiles or drones today as intelligence mounted about the real threat of an imminent attack against US targets. This is the promised retaliation that we've heard from Tehran over the assassination of its military commander Qasem Soleimani in a US airstrike last week. They said that there would be a military response to that attack. As you said, we are standing by to hear from the president. He spoke earlier today from the White House and said the US response to any Iranian attack would be, quote, disproportionate. Ange?
Yes, this is certainly a frightening escalation. Thanks so much, Amelia. Let's get a check now of the weather forecast with 7 News meteorologist David Brown. How's it looking, Brownie?
Yes, good morning, Ange. The remnants of Cyclone Blake is bringing some long overdue rain to inland WA, and a tropical low is also driving rain and storms across the top end. Now, the wet season has well and truly arrived, and of course that's good news for the southern half of Australia. Why? And of course the reason is the rains will take the edge of the extreme heat that we've seen over recent weeks. But having said that, look, a short burst of extreme heat, dangerous fire weather will slip through South Australia tomorrow before moving on to Victoria and New South Wales. Scattered showers and thunderstorms will follow in this cooler southwesterly airstream. Let's go to the weather wall now. In fact, we're popping into Brisbane. Sunny today, forecast top 31 degrees. For Sydney, have a look at this. Let's pop it. Let's have a look at Brisbane. Sydney, come on. No, we got a... Oh, there we go, smoke. I think we got smoke in the weather system as well. Yeah, not looking flashes at 24 degrees today. Melbourne, it's fine, partly cloudy and heading for a high of around 24 degrees. And as we pop into Adelaide, sunny conditions today, very hot, and a forecast top somewhere around about 36 degrees. A decaying cyclone, which is now sitting off inland WA, is now, of course, producing the welcome rain across the interior. It will eventually make its way in towards South Australia, as you can see from our forecast chart for the next 24 hours. The other thing that stands out is unsettled weather right here along the eastern seaboard with scattered showers and thunderstorms. So for the capitals tomorrow, a hot one in Adelaide, 40 degrees. More snow for Sydney, unfortunately, around 25 degrees. Perth, though, should be sunny and 28. That's the latest weather. More at 4, Ange.
OK, thank you so much, Brownie. And that is 7 News to now. We'll keep you up to date throughout the day with all the latest on the unfolding crisis in the Middle East. I'm Angela Cox. Thanks so much for your company. Bye for now.